Hello and welcome to the trade setup. In this video we are looking at HIMS and HERS health. It is time for another update, and today we'll be discussing the failure to hold here the relevant area of support that would have allowed this movement to create a more direct impulse within a larger wave C to the upside, or at least momentarily within a larger wave 1, part of the larger wave C. Now, before we get there, I would like to go quickly through the larger time frame for any of you who might be new, and here we are tracking a larger leading diagonal to be forming to the upside, where within this structure, honestly, it is pretty much impossible to track a direct impulse to be forming because, basically the structure doesn't really allow such an interpretation. Now, in our scenario, in the main scenario that we are tracking, we have here an initial wave 1 up, a wave 2 down, and we are in a third wave to the upside, within which we have an A wave complete, a B wave complete, and within the wave C we have the wave 1, 2, 3, 4th complete, and we are now within the 5th wave to the upside. And as mentioned in the previous videos, there are more bullish interpretations, there are more bearish interpretations, but for now there is no reason to focus on any other scenario than what we have here on the chart, because right now we are within the area of support. We still have room, we didn't break here the 78.6% retracement, and as long as we still hold here the $30 level, the probabilities for continuation higher within this scenario, or again even a more bullish one, are still good and are still very interesting, especially since within this initial wave A to the upside we have a 5-wave move complete, we have a 3-wave correction, and we possibly have already bottomed within this wave B. Now, as you can see, we do still have room within the area of support, and there is no reason to believe we could not extend lower still, even within this wave C. And we were tracking already a scenario that would have allowed here a larger 5-wave move to the downside to still occur, although it was not a preferred scenario for a few reasons that we have actually laid out in the previous video. So firstly, if we were to consider here a 1, 2, 3, in this wave 3 we wouldn't have gotten to the ideal target. Then in this wave 4, the extension, the proportion of the wave 4 itself is considerably larger than what we would have here in the wave 1. And for those reasons, it is rather likely that if we push lower, we may need to consider this interpretation, but it is not necessarily a high probability scenario. Now, since we did, however, fail to hold here the relevant support levels for a direct impulse to be formed from this area to the upside, we need to start considering different options. So we have not yet gotten here into the area of resistance that we are tracking here for a large potential 1-2 setup or anything similar, basically anything similar in that fashion. But I want to remind you that even if we were to build a larger wave C in a diagonal structure, that would be no problem, Keep in mind we even built here this initial wave A to the upside within a diagonal structure, and the same applies for an initial wave 1 to the upside, We cannot really consider anymore that we were able, or that we could form here a double 1-2-1-2 setup, and there definitely were some attempts to hold here this area of support. As you can see, we did push to several of those levels and have gotten significant reactions to the upside. Here the 50% retracement, actually let's even move closer, but here the 50% retracement, then the 61.8% retracement, then even the 78.6% retracement. All of them created decent reactions to the upside, but in the end, due maybe also having a factor from the larger market, this stock as well succumbed to the pressure of driving prices lower. Now, with that said, again, this doesn't prevent me from tracking this as a larger wave 1 to the upside within, again, an ABC structure that could build in the end a larger 5-wave move to the upside within a leading diagonal. And in this case, we would need to be tracking here an updated area of support for such a wave 2 correction. Now, if we draw the proper levels, we would actually notice that even in this interpretation, we had reactions at each of the relevant levels. So firstly, the 38.2% retracement, the first reaction after this more significant decline, then the 50% retracement, we had another reaction upside, then the 61.8% retracement, there were a couple of attempts, and now the 78.6% retracement has slowed the momentum even further, and we do start to see some sort of a bottoming structure Although again, this is a 3-wave move to the upside. This is not necessarily a high probability interpretation, and if we even break here below the 78.6% retracement, it would be a warning sign that this structure is rather likely than not to actually extend and form a new low, possibly within this wave C, possibly within different interpretations. We don't need to focus too much on the exact count internally, but from a large time frame perspective, or somewhat larger, we do still have room within the area of support, and we do still have the ability to extend lower. However, the momentum has definitely slowed down ever since we have started this correction. The structure to the downside has been slowing down and has become more choppy, with these latest developments only being further proof of that. Now, before we look internally within this wave 2, I also would like to point out and possibly even bring back on the chart the previous interpretation that we did allow only, though again, it wasn't necessarily a very high probability interpretation because of the few signals that I provided you earlier. I mentioned them, that wave 3 is not really long enough for a reliable wave 3 to be considered here. Then the wave 4 is out of proportions with this wave 2 correction. So we need to be aware this is a difficult area. And if we want, however, to track the relevant areas, the relevant levels of resistance, we would be watching here the levels between the $36.5 all the way up to the $43.1 level. And certainly, even here, we pushed into the 50% retracement. This is the exact point from which we have gotten rejected, with only a week managing to touch it before creating this larger downtrend from this time frame perspective anyway. And we are going to track this scenario in orange, and within this interpretation I would have to consider that this structure is certainly formed within a diagonal pattern. In the yellow scenario where the wave C would already be complete here, we were tracking an impulse, but in this orange scenario I need to be tracking this as an A, B, C structure to be formed to the downside. So even if we do manage to extend here higher, this could have been just an A wave complete, and it would line pretty fine with the internal structure. Now, definitely this is way too choppy to have any reliable setup to be tracked even in a short position. But if I wanted to be tracking here a potential A, B, C movement to the downside within the orange interpretation, we could have a relevant area of resistance for such a pattern, where we would be watching here the levels between the 38.2% retracement. So this is a wave B that is expected. So the 38.2% retracement to the $36.7 all the way up to the $39.4 level, where if we manage, the same way if we break to the downside, the 78.6% retracement, the 78.6% retracement resistance level, if broken, would be a signal that this structure is likely going to manage to break out in the expected wave 3 in the yellow scenario. Now, sure, we do still have here the red interpretation in place. It could still form a larger A, B, C movement within a large correction and still fail in the end. But right now we need to be a little bit more patient, wait for some more structures that would allow us to track with higher probabilities either scenario. And for example, here when we initially formed this local low, we did track here an initial 5-wave move to the upside, which allowed us to look for a 3-wave correction that allowed continuation higher in another 5-wave move to the upside. Only that it didn't manage in the end to extend higher. So we see a lot of indecision in the market overall, and I wouldn't necessarily expect a decision this week. It is the holiday times, and we do tend to see reduced volumes and action in these time frames. But these are definitely levels and areas to consider over the next period. And for now, these are the levels. This is the trade setup. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, don't forget to subscribe and let me know what else you want me to cover, and I'll do my best to do that in the days and weeks ahead. And until then, I hope you have a nice day, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.